This is a Republic Notice. The title of this Republic Notice is called Wong Kim Ark, Frenemy of Blacks in the USA. Wong Kim Ark, Frenemy of Blacks in the USA. It's August 2014. We're coming towards the end of this month. This year is closing out fast. We'll be up to 2015, and that's a significant year because that's when they're going to identify a museum called the African American Museum. And towards the end of this, I'm going to tell you the significance of that and why you better wake up and not let history be misconstrued. Okay, Wong Kim Ark, the frenemy of blacks in the USA. Who's Wong Kim Ark? Wong Kim Ark is a Chinese migrant that challenged the 14th Amendment in 1896 in the Supreme Court. He challenged the 14th Amendment as a Chinese man and said he had birthrights, or the same equality birthrights as the 14th Amendment that blacks had. Now, this was significant because since 1873, there was not anyone who could challenge the 14th Amendment. The Indian tribes, ilk versus ilk, was the first one that tried it, and they said, no, you're considered foreign jurisdiction. And I'm going to tell you why and how this falls into place. But there was white men who tried in the slaughterhouse cases in Louisiana, even though Louisiana was one of the states who vehemently opposed the 14th. They was one of the first to file for rights of the slaughterhouse workers not to be overtaken by the power of the state. The slaughterhouse cases failed. Judge Miller told them that they did not get any privileges that they didn't already have as citizens of several states with the 14th Amendment, that the 14th Amendment was a Negro amendment and it was part of Reconstruction. And you cannot separate really the 13th, 14th, 15th as the Reconstruction amendments, and you can't separate the 13th, 14th, 15th from the 1 through 12th as the Supreme First Contract with the Bill of Rights 1 through 15 and the Reconstruction amendments, which are bodies of law. Now, how this relates to Wong Kim Ark is the Supreme Court by 1896 was hijacked. We had other imported whites come in, some from Britain. Now they're coming to capitalize on this setup down America. We had the Civil War, the Constitution was settled. We had the U.S. corporation by then. We had things settling down after Reconstruction. So everyone started coming to capitalize. And as you know, whites always go to try to capitalize on something that someone else did, and they want to immediately take it over, take credit. This is part of their parasitic behavior on earth. So the Supreme Court went and started talking about what England wanted in the 14th Amendment and said, well, the 14th Amendment can't be an amendment that, penalizes whites or don't consider Britons or Irish or European whites of Scottish or Irish or Britain or of Netherlands, Switzerland, Sweden, and all what they are in the 26th Union, the European Union. They call that the European Union now. Okay, so this Supreme Court decided to go against what the 14th Amendment was and what Judge Miller said it was part of the Reconstruction Amendments, and they felt as though they can take that 14th and isolate it away from the 13th Amendment and 14th Amendment as if it was not part of the Reconstruction Amendment, and they glued whites of the European Union to Wong Kim Ark. And so in this court, and since no citizens of several states protested this and they accepted this because they was itching to bitch themselves anyway for this 14th Amendment because they have a parasitic drive. Like they fiend to infringe. If they can't infringe and they can't fiend to infringe, you take away their breath. Like if they can't fiend and trample on blacks with their fiending, then their breath is cut off. They consider that part of breathing. And so what they did was isolate the 14th, not only from the Reconstruction Amendments, but from the 1 through 12th Amendments, which are the Bill of Rights. And so then they built up this whole system with Wong Kim Ark on this 114th, and we did have a U.S. attorney. And the U.S. attorney in that case simply stated that Wong Kim Ark was not a citizen. And the U.S. attorney did not push it too far because we had just come out of a war, no more than 20 years, and they didn't want another civil war. And so they said that history was already written within the Constitution because the winners write the history, and blacks are citizens in the Constitution. So don't let anyone ever tell you they're not a winner. They can put what they want in the history books, but the Constitution is the historical foundational document that hold blacks. And they can say, well, it don't say the color black. Well, Judge Miller said it was a Negro amendment, but we know this, that all the court cases came after it came to blacks and made black citizens. So it came to blacks first. So we do know this, that they had to go to court to try to claim it. So we do know that blacks inherited, and 3/5 could not consent. 3/5 could not consent. Once a non-consenter, always a non-consenter. So they inherited, and they inherited what that meant is they inherited a non-consented amendment. So the attorney did not argue because he knew constitutionally since 1868 that this 14th Amendment was non-consented. So he let this hijack court go ahead and process Wong Kim Ark and saying that he was somehow a citizen, and all the Europeans was glued to him in this fraudulent citizenship, because no matter what they did on the hijacked Supreme Court, the Constitution had non-consent jurisdiction established because they had to change the whole jurisdiction of the Constitution to abolish slavery, since slavery had been a consent jurisdiction since the inception of the Constitution. And the reason they had to change the jurisdiction because the Bill of Rights would not have been any good either, because the Bill of Rights would have been under consent jurisdiction to slavery. So what kind of Bill of Rights is that that's under the consent jurisdiction to slavery? It does not give it any teeth. It does not give it any God's sovereignty if it's meshed in with a contract of consent jurisdiction to slavery. So they changed the whole jurisdiction to non-consent. And so when all persons born under the jurisdiction thereof, they was under the jurisdiction of consent jurisdiction, and then when the jurisdiction changed, they was under the jurisdiction of non-consent jurisdiction. So, and blacks had changed this jurisdiction along with the Constitution because they are the Constitution. And therefore, Wong Kim Ark is a citizenship by fraud, because regardless of what the Supreme Court said, non-consent jurisdiction had already been established to the 14th and to the 1 through 15th Amendments, because it all became non-consented jurisdiction. Non-consent is God's sovereignty because it's Teflon. It's Teflon, and you can't overcome the contract. You can trample it like dogs and animals and put a gun to it, and then that's all the power you got, is that your gun power. And so what Wong Kim Ark is a frenemy of blacks. He netted all the European, based on this case, into fraudulent citizenship. And the fraudulent citizenship is prima facie, or prima facie, however you pronounce it, because the non-consent jurisdiction means that the 14th was non-consented. And the fact that the judges put forth a consent to Wong Kim Ark meant that they put forth a foreign jurisdiction. So he was not of the jurisdiction thereof, or under the jurisdiction thereof, because consent jurisdiction was foreign constitutionally by 1896. I mean, it had been abolished in 1865. So these people claiming citizenship found behind Wong Kim Ark, or the Wong Kim Ark case, are claiming citizenship by fraud, are claiming a fraudulent citizenship. That's easy to see. That's easy to see, because non-consent jurisdiction means that no citizenship was consented, and there was no consent jurisdiction to consent Wong Kim Ark as a citizen, as a constitutional citizen, or any kind of citizen, not even a citizen of several states. So all those who claim New England as the new settlement and came here and think that this citizenship was something that could be hoarded out, and for people who now just think American citizenship is hoarded out to the world, there is no constitution that states the Constitution of the United States and the world. It says the Constitution of the United States of America. But this ideal that the Constitution is a world whore concept came, and it's being perpetrated by the excuse of Wong Kim Ark to pretend that the Constitution is a world whore contract, that anyone can open their legs and plop out a baby and their automatic citizenship. Our Constitution is actually stricter than most countries. It's cosmically stricter than the Mexican Constitution, cosmically, because non-consent is built in and automated by the 15th Amendment vote on all legislation that doesn't need no one to do nothing. Okay? So this European insistence, like all these Britons come here and how they whoring out all the Academy of Music awards to Britons and Australians and all this stuff, is based on their concept of that, again, that they must parasite in order to breathe off of what blacks are the founders of. And a lot of people say, well, how is blacks the founder of the Constitution? Well, I didn't say they were the signatories. The signatories are the witnesses. We have 47 to 48 signatures. They're the witnesses to blacks being the body of the Constitution, the bodies of law of the Constitution, that the jurisdiction is based on, and that's the 14th Amendment, under the jurisdiction thereof. Now, under doesn't mean below, it means encased in. Encased in, when something is encased in, that means Fort Knox. See, the white prejudice is going to say, oh, they were below, and they're going to treat the 14th like it was some charity amendment. Well, if it was a charity amendment with blacks, then how poor are you to come here begging for it and to be willing to commit a fraudulent citizenship just by you being here and giving birth? Where the Wong Kim Ark case has prima facie evidence of fraudulent citizenship. If blacks are these so-called poor who needed this amendment, then what is this world coming here claiming equal rights under it? And they do come here and they claim equal rights under it, and I got a right to this religion, and they don't understand the Constitution. They say, oh, I got freedom of religion. There are no religious tests. Well, that means you cannot test our Constitution religiously either. Our Constitution is a Judeo-Christian Constitution, and you under Islam don't have a right to test that. Where do y'all get off that the Constitution is not equal to all these world whores of fraudulent citizenship and fraudulent rights based on some yellow man after everything was established, and based on some foreign jurisdiction of consent that hasn't existed since 1865? And yet you think you can challenge the Constitution, no Judaic-Christian concept? And it is based on Judaic-Christian concept, because black Americans are the Jews, and they are the Messianic Jews, which means they believe in Christ in majority, and they're the main Christians in this country, along with our constitutional writers and signers. The majority of them were Christian men. And they witnessed us as the body of the Constitution and the citizens of the Constitution. Now, we do have citizens of several states, and the citizens of several states are now connected with black women, because you can't war against the Constitution and maintain constitutionality. And most white majority are at war with the Constitution because most of them are at war with blacks. And so that they're at war with the Constitution. You can't be two animals at one time, part of something and at war with something, because it's antithetical. Okay? And so majority of the whites are at war with the Constitution. They're not of the Constitution. Although we do have whites of the Constitution, because black women give birth to whites. Like Eartha Kitt, daughters and granddaughter, like Johnny Carson, granddaughter, looks pretty much white, like Mae Ripperton, daughter, and Diana Ross got some children that look mixed, some of them may look a little white. And then we have black women giving birth to, Chinese, African, other Israelites, like Lauryn Hill had a whole tribe of Marleys within the Constitution. Now, these born from the black woman are citizens of several states, and they fall under the 13th Amendment. Voluntary servitude by consent to serve Jesus Christ or the Most High. That's the other. And see, that's within the non-consent jurisdiction. Although they're voluntary servitude by consent, they're within the 1 through 15th Amendment of the jurisdictional change. The jurisdiction is non-consent, even though when black women mate with other than a black man, she's mating with a holy Gentile. And they're the holy Gentile consenters. They're the holy Gentile consenters protected under God's sovereignty and under the law of Christ within the Judaic Constitution. So I'm saying we have many nations within it, but the majority, 300 million, it has citizenship based on fraud, which means they're united squatters, stealing, thieves, and embezzling for the globalists. This is Mary Omni from the House of King David. If you want more on this report of how Wong Kim Ark is a frenemy, in that he helped establish the fraud, so we can easily see the fraud, and basically he claimed we own the Chinatowns, that any Chinese man do anything on this soil. Wong Kim Ark said we're the first investors because he was the first one that grabbed 14th Wealth and said it was his on the Supreme Court record. So that means he put all Chinese, just like he did whites, in the line of claiming that we are their benefactors. If they're claiming our 14th is non-consented, they're claiming that we are their benefactors based on fraud. So if they're based it on fraud, then they owe us, and that means we have a supreme contract on anything they own. This is Mary Omni from the House of King David. If you want more on this, Wong Kim Ark 1896 is the written report.